Tere tulemast kõigile, tere tulemast. Rõõm on teid tervitada suurel futuroloogilisel kongressil. Tervitan neid, kes on siin juba 4. päeva, tervitan neid, kes on siin esimest päeva. Kõik on siin futuroloogilisel kongressil väga teretulnud. Ja on suur rõõm, et me saame jätkata oma teekonda sellel kongressil ja liikuda järgmise ettekande juurde, mis avaks järgneva tahu sellel tulevike ja kirjanduse ja futuroloogia teemalisel rännakul, mis meil sellel nädalal ees on. So welcome everyone to the great Futurological Congress. It's great to see you here, the ones that are here for the 4th day and the ones that are here for the first time. And without further ado, I am pleased to ask on stage our next discussion and presenter, Lesley-Ann Brown. Yeah, the floor is yours.
So hello, Lesley-Ann Brown. Just a short introduction.
Yes.
So Lesley-Ann Brown is a Caribbean-American writer who is originally from Brooklyn, New York, and she has published 2 books. Decolonial Daughter, Letters from a Black Woman to Her European Son, which was published in 2018, and Black Girl on Mars from 2023. And she's also an educator and activist. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So we had the thought of starting
Yes.
our talk with poem.
That's right. I will read a poem. It's my latest work, and it's a very good indicator of where I am in terms of my practice. And also geographically, because 3 years ago, I moved to a small island in Denmark, which is considered the geological birthplace of Denmark. So that's the space from which I write at the present moment. The poem is entitled, "The Water Has Memory," and I recommend that you sit back and allow yourself to hear, because it is a bit long. The water has memory. I don't know why you don't tell me about the past I cannot see. The silence is dark and haunts me, wakes me up, no longer dream. No, I scream, as Granddaddy carries my small, struggling body into the raging sea. My little fingernails dig deep into his tamarind-colored arms as I attempt to squirm out of his hold. There is a drizzle on Maracas Bay, a drizzle that lands on my childish cheeks. I arch my back in terror and catch sight of the sky stuffed with silver clouds. A gray has cast itself over the once shimmering sand and relieves us from the scorching sun. As a child, I did not understand this body of water for what it is. It ebbs and flows, this island's heartbeat. Families pilgrim to this holy place, passed down throughout lifetimes. Maracas, the name itself, conjures joy. And she has always been Maracas, this island's temple of joy. But not on this day. Mommy, I yell, but Mommy cannot hear me. She is far away in another land up there. Years later, I will learn that she too cannot save me. Mommy, I scream again. Granddaddy sucks his teeth. You see you, he asks. I'm not able now. He turns his back to the gray waters and quickly returns me to my grandmother's arms. I burrow my body into the safety that she is. You must learn to bathe in the sea, my grandmother says. She will heal you. Banish the gods that keep you quiet, who keep you locked up in this silence. Water, the Omahu sister says, her ribbon skirt of various blues, is the original medicine. In fact, the name Omahu, or Omaha as we know it in the States, means to go against the current, which her people did. And it was in this way they settled north on Turtle Island, away from the European settlers. The Omahu people attempt to flee from the settlers stealing their land. So they followed the water. What happens to a people who turns the other cheek, who learns to love her enemy, who learns to live asleep? There is an Anders Skram Meinsner pastel on the wall of an opulent Christianshavn apartment. The drawing is divided into 2 equal parts, orange on the bottom, blue on the top. There are again blue figures sketched into the orange, 10 of them, human-shaped. Above this, on the baby blue portion of the drawing, is a darker blue great wave from which 3 dots emanate, possibly suns. On top, it reads, soft like the Atlantic. I don't know why you won't tell me about the ethereal space we're from, through the ages divided since time has begun. My Atlantic, I think, is not soft. My ancestors are still there. Here in the city town, I learn about merchants and their ships of human cargo. Over 200 slave ships have sailed from here. Some of us have been driven from our land. Some of us are still on slave ships, while others are in POW camps. Still others still drown in the Mediterranean, still. I who grow gods from the roots of my hair, I who fly flags of different colors in the air, I who cut the cane, drink the rum in the rain, wash the clothes in the river again and again. You live long after you thought you'd die. What to do with all this time unimagined? I do not know why you won't tell me the past. I do not know why the love did not last. All I want for you to tell me is who to love and who is enemy. You end up on an island far away from where you come from. The island, you will learn, is the geological beginning of this land, known as Denmark. Cast in chalk on the universe's drafting board, this land forged from ice. When you move into your new home, there is snow on the ground. On this quiet street, there is but one person who walks by twice a day, around 9 every morning and again around 3 in the afternoon. You learn that his name is Skiba. He tells you he has been out to sea for over 30 years. You look like you can be from Brazil, he says to me. No, my people are from Trinidad. He tells me that he too has been to Trinidad. His dog, saved from Romania, barks excitedly. I'm wary of overzealous dogs. Bamse won't harm you, he assures me in Danish. I have now been on my island paradise for 6 months. The landscape has morphed from white to green to brown. I have seen the lilacs bloom. It has been dry. The earth is thirsty. There has been no rain. Why won't you tell me from whence it began, from the sweet wombs of women whose songs they sang, a moaning and groaning straight from the earth, pushing through darkness, life giving birth. Be quiet and stay still, please, do not disturb, were the words that were heard. A woman begins to cry in a restaurant on this island. Do you know why I'm crying, she asks. The customers and staff, her witness. I'm crying because my family left this island in the 16 and 1800s. They left to move to Texas because they were given free land. If you do not tell me the facts of your past, I cannot perform the spiritual mass. This island is not small. I do not have a car. Yesterday, I stuck my thumb out while walking on a country road. A car pulls over. I negotiate with the young couple. I sit in the back. There are Ukrainian flags on the dashboard. The blue, the sky, the yellow, I am told, is of the wheat that feeds Europe. I ask them about Ukraine. I ask about the Nazis I hear fighting their war. They are not Nazis, Sergei tells me. They are nationalists. The space in between is inviting a wonder, as silent as snow, as powerful as thunder. I have PTSD, my boss tells me. I do too, I want to tell him. He has war in his eyes blue as the Estonian sky from which they say Danenbro fell, and his heart is as open. I was a captain in the military for over 30 years. First one in, last one out, he says, while we run around a slippery restaurant floor to fill orders of greasy food. It's a hot, sweltering day. I love the heat, he says. Just put me out in the desert, combat boots, fatigues, no family, no wife, no kids. I had a budget of millions of dollars. To build up what we destroyed, I asked. He looks at me, startled at first, but his body then shrugs in subtle self-sovereignty. His blue eyes recall ancient journeys across Nordic seas, of ancient seafarers ashore foreign lands. I shudder in memory of those past who have met such eyes in conquest. Don't forget to drink water, I remind him. In this heat, you have to be careful. I hate water. He explains that is all he had to drink in Iraq, in Afghanistan. I built a water well there once, he says. I'm not sure if it's in Iraq or Afghanistan he's talking about. I don't know, but I don't interrupt. I listen. I raised the money and everything, and they stole it all. I hate water. That's all we had to drink. I hate water. And he takes a sip of his tepid beer. I don't know why you don't tell me from the past in which I see. The silence is dark and haunts me, wakes me up. I no longer dream. I walk along mustard fields with flowers as shiny as Guyanese gold. There is death everywhere. The dead deer in the field, the butterfly caught in a spider's web, the field mouse brought in by the cat. There is life too. A bat that visits every evening, the bees that fly inside, I catch them in glass and set them free again. One day, a bolt of lightning hits the power tower across from where I live and heralds rain that finally falls on the parched earth. I cry when it begins to rain. I don't know why you won't stay. I don't know why you won't say. Get the gods that keep you quiet, keeps us locked up in this silence. There is mullein growing in my garden. I pick the leaves and dry them. Mullein is good for the lungs, so it must be good for grief. I don't know why you don't tell me. Congo? Can you name an ice cream that? The peculiar fellow asks me at the shop. Apparently so, I answer. We're in Denmark. I want to tell them about the local ice cream company has one called Eskimo. But what's the point? He speaks with what I now recognize to be a posh British accent. He's dressed like a physicist, or what I imagine a physicist to be dressed like, unruly yet presentable. His companion is an East Indian woman whose skin seems to be kept hidden from the sun. She does not look at me when she speaks. She must be Brahmin, I think. The customers you serve sometimes speak German, or they are the Dutch and the Danish ones who all speak English. There are peacocks who inhabit this park, and if you listen carefully, you might hear what sounds like a child's voice yell, "Help me." Like the peacocks, I too am far from home. I don't know why you won't say the songs to be sung, the trees to be planted. My garden changes with each season. It smells like strawberry in the spring. In the summer, blossoms will become cherries. And in the fall, yarrow grows abundantly along roadsides as the nettles hang over, heavy with seed. The mallow recedes back into the earth. Wheat fields undulate in the wind. Mugwort grows alongside plantain, while dried out angelica stems stand tall. There is wild oregano growing in the fields. I spy a bird the color of concrete. One day I disembark from the bus onto a quiet country road. Unusually, there is another person who does so as well. She, I would later learn, is a weaver. She carries a bag on each shoulder and rolls a suitcase behind her. As is often the case on these quiet country roads, we begin to chat. We're walking in the same direction, so I offer to carry her bag. She's friendly, I like her immediately, and she's curious about me. I answer that I live here and how much I love this island, the uninterrupted view of the sky with no buildings, the fertile fields, the quiet that is sacred. Yes, she says to me, when I first moved here, it was the first time I felt this is my country, this is my land, I belong here. Are you alone, she asks me. Do you have a husband, a family? I don't know why you won't say about the calabash, the drums, the universe granted, that reality is invented, and about all the lives represented. And like water, our consciousness is connected. And one day it will come to pass that all that has been constructed shall one day be deconstructed, for such is the law of the water. Christian Muhammad and I go to the beach. It has been many years since my soul has been to sea, and 5 since my grandmother has passed, yet both remain with me. The water is cold. I submerge myself quickly, and as my body emerges from the darkness, I'm recharged. It has now been several months since I last saw Skiba. The cuckoos have announced their return. The swallows have nested in my garage. Soon I will learn that Skiba too has passed. This is what water remembers. This is what she sees. This is the story she tells us, and with it, she sets us free. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Fortunately, we don't have the full translation of this poem, but later on I will read some small excerpts. Yes. So in this poem, you start from your childhood, and you mentioned the Maracas Bay in Trinidad, and that's where you spent parts of your childhood. And you're also talking in your books about how important it is to acknowledge and to acknowledge the diversity of the stories of lineages and migrations.
Right.
So maybe you would like to just very briefly talk a little bit about your background, your story, where you come from.
Sure, thank you. Okay, so I think it's important that we all look at our genealogies to better understand our lives, period, because story is sort of everything. Everything has a story, and stories help us navigate life. So for me, I started that journey very early because I was very curious. I was born curious about my family, and my family is originally from Trinidad and Tobago, which, if you know anything about colonization, was first a Spanish colony to extract wealth, and then later it moved on to the British, and again continued, its existence was to extract wealth. And in this project of extraction are of course the stories of enslavement, indentureship, our relationship to the land. So because I ended up being born, or my family, on this island in the Caribbean, and because of my particular stories that I've learned not only through history, but from what I can garner, I learned how colonization, Western European colonization, impacted the world, and also my life, because where would I be? Where would I have been if it wasn't for this moving around? And this idea that any of us, no matter where we come from, whether it's Denmark, Estonia, Trinidad, that we have lineages that are fixed and static and unmoving is not true. Because human beings, that's what we do. That's one of our most, I think, primal drives is to move. We have to move. If we don't have food where we are, if we don't have water, we move. Which is one of the reasons why I think the border regimes that we're now facing is interesting, because it's attempting to dam or stop the movement of people, which I don't know if you can. So that's how I would answer that question.
Great. There's
so many things. Yeah,
absolutely. But also, I did want to ask. So we look into our past. We kind of look into our family histories and stories. But then again, how does talking and thinking about the past help us in imagining our future or thinking about the future?
Yeah, beautiful question. There's a Twi concept. So Twi is it's a Ghanaian language, and there's this symbology they have called adinkra. And there's this one, so there are many different symbols, and they represent different ones. And there's one of a bird that is facing back. So the bird is facing forward, but the face is facing back. And it's called Sankofa. And Sankofa means to go back and fetch it. So the whole concept is to go back in the past and take what we need in order for the future. So that's the spirit. The spirit is that we find what we can. We're reminding our stories for the treasures that we need in order to live our lives in the fullest way possible. That's intended.
Yes, that's a beautiful symbol.
Yeah. Yes.
Absolutely, and totally agree with that.
Yes.
So let me read this one small part of the poem. Minu Atlandi ookean ei ole pehme. Minu esivanemad on ikka veel seal. Siin selles linnakeses saan teada kaupmeestest ja nende inimkargoga täidetud laevadest. Üle 200 orjalaeva on siit välja purjetanud. Mõned meist on meie oma maadelt minema aetud. Mõned meist on ikka veel orjalaevadel, sellal kui teised on vangilaagrites, ikka veel teised, ikka veel upuvad Vahemeres. So this passage about the Atlantic Ocean, the water, the ancestors on the slave ships, and still being in prison camps and all that. So that's sometimes these are quite tough things that we have to look at.
Yes.
We have to talk about, and often we do find a lot of traumas that haven't been addressed. We find silences. We find violence, not to mention disappointments and so on. So how do we navigate through all that when we start looking into the past? How do we deal with it?
Well, that's a great question. And there are systems, I mean, whether you talk about truth and reconciliation or, I mean, in many cultures, I'm sure if you were to look at pre-Christian culture here, you would find that there were ways that human beings managed trauma. We're all going to have traumas in our lives. There's no way of escaping it. We're going to have them individually. We're going to sometimes experience it collectively. The part I'm interested in at this point is how do we rehabilitate? How do we rehabilitate ourselves, and how do we rehabilitate one another, and making that information available. The care is so important, especially as we're moving into this hyper technological capitalist state. How do we maintain care for ourselves, each other, interspecies? I mean, it's the how do we manage life in the most respectful way so that there is the space to thrive.
Yeah. Also, there's this beautiful quote you had in one of your books that that liberation is contingent upon our understanding of self,
right?
And that there's no better teacher than our ancestors. So that's kind of looking back to where we come from, and then also studying ourselves and all the conditioning we have.
And I wanted to say something about the ancestors too, because at some point it dawned on me. I was like, okay, it's so interesting that my whole education and even the religion I was born into insisted that I revere other people's ancestors. And that's when I became suspicious. So, and I think, and I think in order for our personal power, and maybe you're adopted or something. I know many people who have been, so it's not like a literal going back. And of course, if you have access, that's great. But if you don't, you can we have our imagination. That's stories. Again, we have stories, but they're roadmaps, how other people live their lives. That's why we're always curious, whether it's with celebrities or with one another, how we navigate certain issues, right? We're very attracted to that.
Right, and the stories, again, we can also create new stories, right?
Absolutely.
If we can't find the ones that that help us. Right. Nice. There's in this poem you were reading, there's really like a multitude of topics, and I'd like to read another part of it, a little bit longer one. Eile pistsin külatee ääres kõndides pöidla püsti. Üks auto peatus. Ma pean läbirääkimisi noore paarikesega. Istun tagaistmele. Armatuuril on Ukraina lipud. Sinine on taevas ja kollane, nagu mulle räägitakse, on nisu, mis toidab Euroopat. Ma küsin neilt Ukraina kohta. Küsin natside kohta, kes nende eest sõdivad. Need ei ole natsid, vastab Sergei. Need on natsionalistid. Kahevaheline ruum on kutsuv nagu ime, vaikne nagu lumi, võimas nagu kõu. Mu ülemus ütleb mulle, et tal on posttraumaatilise stressi sündroom. Tahaksin talle öelda, et minul niisamuti. Tema silmades on sõda, silmades, mis on sinised nagu Eesti taevas, kust kukkus alla Tannebroo, nagu räägitakse. Ja tema süda on sama avatud. Ma olin üle 20 aasta armees, kapteni auastmes Jõudsin esimesena, lahkusin viimasena, räägib ta mulle, kui teeme libedal restorani põrandal jooksusamme, et täita rasvase toidu tellimusi. On palav, lämmatav päev. Ma armastan kuumust, ütleb ta. Saada mind lihtsalt kõrbesse, tanksaapad, väsimus, ei mingit peret, ei mingit naist, ei mingit lapsi. Mul oli miljonite dollarite suurune eelarve. Kord rääkis ta, et talle meeldib öelda asju, mida taanlased muidu välja ei ütle. Kas selleks, et ehitada üles seda, mida me hävitasime, küsin mina. Ta vaatab mind esmalt jahmunult, aga siis kehitab õlgu õrnas enese suveräänsuses. Tema sinised silmad meenutavad iidseid retki üle Põhjamerede, iidseid meresõitjaid võõraste maade randadel. Mina judisen, mäletades neid, kes on selliseid silmi valutuste ajal kohanud. Ära unusta vett juua, tuletan ma talle meelde. Selles kuumusest tuleb ette vaadata. Ma vihkan vett. Ta selgitab, et muud ei olnud tal juua Iraagis, Afganistanis. So this is one of the passages where I found that so many things coincide, like there's the topic of wars, the questions who are fighting in the wars. There's a multitude of things to
It's really beautiful too when you read it.
to discuss. Thank you. So it's I did want to start with this kind of notion that on Monday here was a Ukrainian poet Halina Kruk, and she was talking about how important it is of which words we are using when we're describing wars. If whether if it's her example was whatever if it's Ukrainian conflict or Russian invasion, for example. Also, U.S. likes to call the wars interventions.
Right.
Okay. So it's so there was this passage where I immediately felt like a lot of feelings rushing up about Ukraine. It's pretty interesting. The part of the Nazism, it's like I kind of started reflecting on it, it's and found this kind of internal conflict as well, because the Russian propaganda is saying that we are fighting against Nazism, and this is Ukraine or also Baltic countries are fascist countries. And whilst there are Nazis probably in every European country, there's like this thing of that Ukrainians we see them as they are resisting the occupation and colonization, right? Yes. Yeah. So that was right. That was one of the passages that stuck out from the
so
poem.
Close to you, right? Absolutely. Yeah.
And
that's why I'm asking this couple in the car, like, what's up with this story?
Absolutely.
So I'm hearing this. I'm not going to pretend I know anything about. As far as I'm concerned, imperialists aren't imperialists, whether they're Russian imperialists or whatever. So that question was. It was just an interesting little moment, which is what the piece is. These moments of where things happen, and I want to cast a light on it. Not that I have an opinion, but this is,
But it's asking questions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And also there was this other question to the military captain. That. Is it for building stuff? But obviously, it's for destroying.
Right.
Yeah.
What are military campaigns? No matter what our allegiances are. It's a good question to ask.
Yeah. I do know that you have a kind of that you're critical about nationalism, and can you tell us about it? Where does it come from? What's your stance on that, actually?
Oh, yeah. I never liked flags, always, my whole life. And then when I started kind of like investigating it and looking into it and learning that the nation state is a relatively new project, it's a project that's very tied to coloniality. I think patriotism, this idea that, you know, for fatherland, and sometimes we say motherland, I think it puts us in a state of rigidity where we become very rigid and not flexible. And when we're not flexible, you know, little things crop up like fascism. So it's, to me, it's sort of like a gateway to it whatever it leads to. I don't like it. I don't feel comfortable. I would prefer if we had a relationship to where we are geographically that related more to being respectful towards the land and its creations, as opposed to laws and government and states, these very rigid, unyielding ideas that are structures of control.
Yeah, sometimes I've also had the kind of feeling that nation states may not always be a really like good thing, but in this like neoliberalistic capitalism, it's sometimes the only thing that can that keeps us from the total power of corporations. And yeah, how do you feel about
well, we're not, as nation states aren't protected. I mean, corporations have more rights,
more power,
than many nation states at the moment, right? So, you know, I don't think a political entity, it protects anyone. Laws don't protect people. I mean, we have this idea that it does, but it's at the end of the day, it's not going to, if someone wants to kill you, they're going to kill you or take your land, you know? I mean, unless you have things in place. So I mean, at the end of the day, it gives us a semblance of control, but, you know, that is the grand truth of it all, is that none of us are in control of anything. And I think the moment when we understand that, not that we can't navigate certain things and have some sort of influence, I don't mean to suggest that, but universally, the truth is that, you know, we're not in control.
Yes, agree with that.
Yeah.
We're not in control, although we're often desperately trying to control things around us.
Yes.
Yeah, just earlier today, I was just briefly discussing with a colleague about the flags, and she was saying that, you know, before the Ukrainian invasion, or the Russian invasion in Ukraine, there was this, you know, also like a similar feeling. You feel if there's flags, it's a bit, you know, you don't feel comfortable with it, or it feels like there's this far right who has kind of colonized it, but then again, things changed after the war started. So suddenly you had this, you get this kind of
comfort from it.
Not comfort. I don't say that. I don't think that would be comfort. I think I had a similar feeling, but it was something like, okay, this is something of our own.
Yeah.
This is something that keeps us here in this land where we come from. And so there's kind of and I also could relate to that, having those kind of mixed feelings about, for example,
I understand that. I absolutely
states,
understand that. Just like with football teams, I understand why people, I do get it. But I think, you know, to hold on to it to the very end, there's a danger in that.
Well, that's with the extremes.
That's right.
Yeah, that's very true. It's there's probably like something about finding the balance in
Yes,
it, and
that's
going
it.
to extremes is never really
No.
anything
Recommended.
good. It's true, but but to go beyond the national identity, what would that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I'm at a point in my life where those are the questions that I'm looking into, and I'm not looking into it from a theoretical framework, because as we discussed also, I sort of like got burnt out with books and theory because I was really into it. And I had to reach where I am right now. I'm just sort of like, what sense could I make out of the life that I'm living with what I have? Like, how can I navigate that? And it's a very primal question that I don't feel we're encouraged to ask ourselves, because we are conditioned to think that other people have the answers for us. Take this path. And so I'm just completely, going kamikaze, just kind of on my own, and being like, what does that look like? What does it look like if I don't have, I'm an American in Western Europe, and that has certain privileges, despite, histories and etc. And I'm just sort of, I don't know how far I can get away from, I can get from being an American. I have a big mouth, I make a lot of noise, right? I'm not that intelligent. But anyway, it's just, I don't have any answers. And I think that's what gives me the most peace in my life right now, is giving myself the permission to examine things in an intuitive way, and realizing that perhaps there are no answers, and allowing myself to have great comfort. Actually, I'm still seeking, but understanding the mystery of it all, because at the end of the day, there is not one discipline, academic discipline, that can tell me why we're all here. That mystery still exists.
Certainly.
So that's what I always go back to.
Mm-hmm. But also, I mean, you have to be, in a way, very brave to kind of break out from those concepts, and also to find this inner strength to live that way.
Well, actually the opposite, because it was when I was the other way that was driving me crazy, when I thought I could figure all this stuff. And then when I stopped wrestling with my ego, when I stopped expecting my life to look a certain way, and all the other things that go along with having this very strong identity of who I thought I was, and the stories I told myself, when I let all of that go, I became way more relaxed.
Okay,
and mentally stable.
So sometimes you also have to let go of the stories.
Yes, absolutely. I highly recommend it. That's why, playing around with the whole national identity and nationalism, it's okay to go there. That's not the deal, but we can't hold on to things 100%. We have to have that balance where we're going in and out between the concrete, the manifestations, and the mysteries. That's the status of our existence on an everyday level if we were to check in with ourselves.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I think it does. Yeah. I did also want to ask about the in the poem there was this Donnebro that fell, and the Estonian skies.
Yes.
Where did the Estonian skies come from?
Yeah. Where did that line come from?
Yeah. Well, how did it end up there in your poem?
Because I always thought it was really funny that they teach in Denmark that a flag fell from the sky. I think that's funny.
They also teach it here.
And that there's some people who really, really, it's taught as though it's a historical fact.
Yeah.
And I just think that's interesting because, Denmark is considered, it's sort of like one of the ways that Denmark has really shown itself is that it is on the forefront of Fort Europe. Denmark is showing how to be really right-wing, and I'm not judging, I'm just stating a fact. They're showing what right-wing immigration policy looks like. And so because of that, I was interested in how the national identity was being shaped. And that, as a teacher, as an educator, you come across that story. And then also seeing how various people related to it, and also Denmark's relationship to the flag. I mean, if you are a foreigner and you visit Denmark, if that flag was like for the Third Reich or something, you'd be completely freaked out. It's everywhere. So I'm curious about that. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Yeah, but it's also, I mean, we also learn about that in school, also as a historical fact in a way.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that from my own studies, and also I remembered then thinking about that, how we studied kind of the positive effects or sides about each colonization that we've had. Yeah. And then I also got this this remembrance of the 90s about this feeling of inferiority towards about the West, and then kind of this this memory about it's wow, it's something that we that makes us a bit more significant. That we had this flag. I mean, it's Danish; it's not ours, but anyway.
But so you had now, and that's the thing. And you're not feeling bad with no reason. Like you know, this where you are, this geographical space. It's on purpose that you are in a school and you feel that you're not as good as the West. It's on purpose you feel that the West is the big brother or all of this is social programming, right?
Yes.
So, nation states do it to their own people, and then they look outward and do it to other people. That's the colonial project. So if you are from a part in Europe where you do not feel good enough, that is on purpose. That was socially engineered. It's not because you're not as good.
yeah, certainly. But I mean, that was, I think the whole society was consumed by it, introducing the neoliberalism in here in early 90s. It was, somehow it was like handed down as well. Yeah. So the politicians, I think, possibly felt similarly, actually.
Well, they have to feel that way because that's what politics is about.
That's true. So there's, and I don't think that there's has been actually enough discussion here also about the colonization.
And that's very important. I mean, it's not about judging. It's just about really understanding how this collective identity has been built. Understanding on your own as an individual, how has my individual identity? I mean, these are things we have to ask ourselves if we want to live a full life, I think.
Yes, true. And so there's this internalized colonization.
Yes, absolutely.
Would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So whatever kind of oppressions that are outside that we grow up with, whether it's racism, classism, colorism, or whatever you're talking, sexism, genderism, all that, it's the way that oppression works is that the only way that it can work is if the people that is being oppressed believe some of these stories, again, going back to stories that's been told about themselves. I'll give you a really good example. In Denmark, Denmark, you have Copenhagen, which is on an island called Sjælland. And Sjælland actually means soul country, which I think is really beautiful. So that's where Copenhagen is. And then the rest of Denmark, if not the islands, it's on the European continent. So the part that's on the European continent is called Jutland. And historically, the financial center at that back in the day was Hamburg. So Denmark was economically facing Hamburg. That was where the money was coming from, right? And at some point, to create the Danish state, nation state, they wanted Danes to face Copenhagen, right? And there was a paper written about this, and if any of you want to read it, you're welcome to contact me and I'll send it to you. It's in Danish, but I think I have it in English as well. So what they did as a matter of policy was to create this inferiority complex among the people from Jutland. This is how the campaign, this is how they got their own people in this nation-state project to look towards Copenhagen. And to this day, so for many years, I used to teach corporate English in very big corporations in Denmark. And 99.9% of the time, I met someone from Jutland, very humble, and also with a very big chip on their shoulder. If you're in Copenhagen, you go out, if you're among Copenhageners, and not all, but I've observed the jokes are about Jutlanders still. So the people from Jutland, they're ridiculed on TV, they're ridiculed in social circles, they're no different than, it's the same people, right, supposedly. So this is how it's accomplished. This is how, so if you're not feeling good about yourself, whether individually or collectively, we need to examine that. Why? And it's on purpose. It's not it's just a fluke that, Eastern Europe has the relationship to itself and to the world as it does.
Yep, and it's absolutely, and I really also liked you have in your books here one quote from Bell Hooks, who writes about that denial is the cornerstone of white European culture.
Yes. Oh, yes, that is the cornerstone. That's the foundation. The lies.
Yeah, and also how the violence is necessary to maintain it, right? So there's violence also serves. It serves every oppressive system, right? Patriarchy or neoliberalism and everything. And the notion of having this one single history, I think that's also part of this kind of collective gaslighting, that there is one story that's most correct, and it comes from the often from the Western Europe, which is kind of wants to see themselves as the beginning and end
of culture, which is ridiculous if you knew history.
Yep. So that's so writing, talking about history. The idea of single history. I also find it kind of violence, actually.
And it's dangerous.
But so as it is with those systems, sometimes also it makes you feel like very, very small. So it's like, what can I do? Like this game is above my head in a way.
Yeah.
So how do we address that?
I don't think there's any prescription. I think we just have to remain vigilant, like in throughout our lives. And if for example, I used to teach, and I found the institution in which I was teaching to be very violent, particularly towards people that were coming from other countries and fleeing war that we instigated. These aren't. So I had to make a difficult decision of leaving my job. It's a case by case. It's really. I had to, living in Denmark, I had to change my life in order for me to have to be more balanced. And when I say balance, I mean physically, mentally, spiritually, all of that. We have to find what works for us, and no two people, it's going to look the same. When I moved to Moon, with this island that I live on, all of my friends of color, they were like, "Why are you moving there? There are no black people," But I had to get rid of that fear and that limitation to go and have the experiences that I've had the last 3 years, which overwhelmingly has helped my physical healing. because this trauma, the emotional, the spiritual, all the stuff that we're talking about, it takes a toll on our bodies. That's the other level to all of this. It's like when we talk about oppression, we're talking about dysregulated nervous systems. We're talking about people, we're talking about walking around, not being balanced, not being present, being unable to respond, reactive, easily to control. So my responsibility to myself is how do I not be in that space for myself and those around me? That's it. That's the only thing I can control.
Yep. Coming back to the control.
Right.
It's true. So, but you were in this education system,
Yes,
where you were trying to. Was it also a place that you could feel that you can impact somehow the like from inside the system, or not really?
I mean, I think teaching, and when I'm going to be very careful here, and I know some people are going to get horrified by what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it. Our education system, at least in the West, particularly for poor people, is, I think, a sort of prison. I don't think it is what we're taught it to be. It can be. I'm not saying you can't have upward mobility, and if those are the things that you want, but most of the time, it seems to be an institution of control. And I say this because I am not comfortable teaching a class, no matter what age, where the people in the class have to ask me to go to the bathroom. I think that's crazy. Or they're being shuffled about by the sound of a bell. There are many papers written that show the relationship between, for example, jail. Like I watched this series, Orange is the New Black, and when I watched it, I swear to you that the building, the jails, it looked exactly like my high school. That's what my high school looked like in New York, right? So for me, there were many things that I couldn't deny personally. I know I have many friends who are teachers who are continuing to teach, and they're not thinking about these things. And I don't mean to come down on teachers, and I don't mean to come down on school, etc. I'm telling you what my personal experience was. So I just, we need to have a very rigorous re-examination of what education is, because again, at least in the West, we have what the Danish Palestinian poet Yahya Hassan calls Eurocentric fundamentalism. So I'm teaching, how am I supposed to teach a group of, let's say, refugees coming in from different parts of the world who have great histories? Their histories are older than our history, our Western European, right? But I am supposed to, feed to them a very whitewashed, no pun intended, education that they have to swallow, that doesn't even acknowledge the existence of other cultures or the in-depthness that we have to other cultures or anything, where we are presenting ourselves as superior to them, which is bullshit. I don't believe in this, anyone is superior to anyone else. So the whole mentality, it's like, I didn't think I could, the only way I felt that I can make a difference with them was to be present and they in the class, and I created as safe a space as possible for them together. But in the end, I had to acknowledge that that wasn't enough. And I had to acknowledge that our education system really relies specifically on women, mind you, and our desire to do good, that is exploited most of the time, I think.
But how do you feel? How should the education look like?
That's a great question, and I think we should be able to talk about it, for real. So for me, when I'm interrogating myself and asking that, I know for a fact that when I look into it, most of all of the sages of the past have said that the truest education is the education of self. Meaning that, of course, if I wanted to learn how to build a rocket, I would go to people who build rockets, right? So of course you seek out, experts, etc. But education is truly an individual process. I think segregating our society so much by age is problematic. I know I have very radical thoughts, but I think, sequestering all the children, I mean, again, in the West at least, our school system was historically based on getting the kids off the streets because they were actually making that much trouble. And also for labor, capitalism, you can't have children working if you want capitalism to work at least the way that it's working now. So there are many reasons that we ought to revisit and it's not completely that, but we should be at least honest and transparent about what education is today or what it has become, at least for many people. We should have these discussions. I don't have any answers. I'm just not teaching in a school.
Yep, because when parents are working, the children have to be somewhere else.
Exactly. So many reasons why we put them in jail.
So what about your own teachers, like in writing, for example? Here you were writing about James Baldwin, but what about other writers who have influenced you, who you've learned from, who are important to you, or books?
Yeah, I thought about that one, and I just, I tend to read a lot of different types of books. I am a little bit, so in publishing, and at least in American publishing, it's very segregated. It's like, so you have like a lot of bookstagrammers, and they'll be like, I'm only reading this genre, and I mean, and that's okay, but for me, I just read whatever I'm interested in. So I could say, for example, there's this book called Braiding Sweetgrass, where this, I think she's a biologist or she's working in the sciences, but she's also indigenous to Turtle Island, which is the term I like to use for the United Settler States, because the US, Australia, New Zealand, etc., they are, by its very nature, European settler colonies, and I think we need to be more honest about what that actually means. So anyway, she wrote a book which looks at indigenous wisdom. So when we talk about Sankofa, what is this knowledge that we can get from the past and bring to the future? Because if our environment is in such a state as what science is telling us, then who are the people who could better prepare us and help us, safeguard us from this very human catastrophe that actually started with European settler colonialism. That is the beginning of the whole ecological disaster.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I did also want to ask one more thing. You are talking about also in your books how people are capable of change, that we are all dynamic beings, that we are in this process of being alive and living. But when you look at this society and how do you feel? What changes are the first and foremost that we need?
Okay, great question. So right now, science is in a really exciting epoch, I think, with understanding neurologically how we function and the relationship, the brain, gut, all this stuff. So we know that, the rigidity that some of us may display in our lives, it is due to an actual rigidity in our neurological system. So if I get up and I do the same thing every day, my brain is going to be wired a certain way. If I was born into a certain environment, my brain is going to be wired a certain way. But thankfully, because of where we are now, it's becoming more readily available that there are many different ways that in the past, we actually were able to recalibrate our neurological systems. So, for example, in my first book, I talk about doing the ayahuasca right? So ayahuasca is something that will completely drop an A-bomb on your neurological system. And when you do that, when you go through that journey, which it's plants, people are like, it's drugs, etc. It's like, read into it, look at the papers, the science all says the same thing, the practice, etc. If it's within a safe environment, etc. That can help us with our plasticity in our neurological system and thus change the way that we see, experience the world and the stories that we tell. And I know that, again, because that's what I did. And before I did, I was very rigid, very hateful, very miserable, and all of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it could help.
It definitely can help.
Mm-hmm. But as a society, so we should all try to move towards this way to get rid of rigidity, right?
I think we have to have spaces. I think right now what's happening is that people, it seems to be, I mean, that's the impression I'm getting, but that maybe that's because what I'm projecting or whatever, but I feel like a lot of people are understanding that where we are in this particular time in history, we need spaces where people can heal. And I'm not talking about in a neoliberal capitalist way where, of course, if you want to go to spas, etc., fine, I'm not saying no. But a lot of people are understanding that we need to have these spaces where we're caring for ourselves and each other, however that may look.
Okay, but how would that look for you? What's the space, that's the safe space for you?
My
for
home, spending a lot of time getting back into my body because of my personal history. I became very good at disassociating and not being present. So when I began to realize that when you experience a multitude of traumas or maybe one big trauma, your spirit literally leaves your body. So understanding that I had to reconnect with my body and learning in that journey that the challenges that I have, whether it's a knot in my muscle that I had to work through or a thought that made me feel really uncomfortable, learning that that was actually the medicine, working through it, like sitting with that uncomfortable thought, or stretching that muscle, or having that difficult conversation. So really experiencing that the things that I'm avoiding, that's actually what I need to eat. That's the medicine.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you also write about nature, actually, that there's this connection to nature, and also I think there's that's a space for healing, like the connection to the earth.
Yeah, I mean, when I moved out to this island, one of the things I experienced immediately was how quickly I would feel bliss when I was out in nature. Like I felt very blissful. It's almost like that after sex feeling. I would feel that. And then other people I talked to who did the same thing, they talked about too, like, yeah, wow, I get so, I feel so excited in nature. And then I was like, wait a minute, this is, so it's as easy as that. It's really as easy as just like going and being, like I told you the other day with mother, because that's how I relate to it. I relate, I'm not super spiritual, I'm not a super nature girl or any of the thing, but when I see bodies of water, when I see trees, when I see, sometimes with humans, but mostly not, I'm reminded that there is something that's very giving, very forgiving, very loving, this energy that gives me a lot of solace.
Mm-hmm. And so there's like a feeling of home also in nature, or
Absolutely. We all belong to this planet. She is our mother, no matter where we come from or no matter what we look like. That's our birthright.
Yeah, because that's what I wanted to ask, like the feeling of home, like how does that look like if you've come from different places and building this sense of home?
Yeah, so that's one of the stories I tell myself. One of the stories I tell myself is that, because from a very early age, I never felt I belonged anywhere due to the particularities of what I experienced. So one of the stories I always told myself is that the reason why I'm here is to really reiterate that home is where we are. I mean, you know, spiritual practitioners like Thich Nhat Hanh, for example, you know, home is, it's in our body. So it doesn't matter where I am, as long as I'm present and in my own seat of power.
Yeah, and I also really like the, on the latest book, there was this sentence that, you know, that you currently reside in your own body.
Right.
That was beautiful.
Because I spent so many years not.
Okay, so maybe there's some questions from the audience as well. There's one.
Is it going to be in English?
Aitäh. Tere kõigile. Hello everybody, I will speak in English.
Okay, cool.
Okay,
Yeah.
so thank you very much, Lesley-Ann. It was very interesting, your stories.
Thank you for coming.
And thank you, Carolina Pijlegas, to help us to make a more point of view about us. I'm from Peru. Foreign here, temporary work. And like a Suur Futuroloogiline Kongress, I will relate a small experience, couple of minutes. Because I check it, you are a teacher, Lesley-Ann,
Yes.
teacher, activist, and follow anti-fascism, no? It's like, I think. And Carolina Pijlegas, I notice you follow some feminist vives, I think. True.
Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate the speech at each one, and I will relate one experience because I studied theater in Argentina. Was some ideas very similar that happens about the problematic, about the stereotypes and imperialist situations. I was not joined, but I was staying with a Workers' Party, the Red Workers' Party, or Partido Obrero, Argentina, and organizes the big march, 8th of March, the big march of feminists, which starts with good. I went to that march. And after the government creates, because appears some news against the situation of the women's, appeared the idea of the no one less women, no? Ni una menos. The government pays money and creates a ministerium, feministerium, or ministerium of women's. That ministerium costs each year $1 million. Taxes, because the people need to pay taxes to keep that ideas. And it starts with good, I think. Appear the third toilet in the university, men's, women's, and
But I don't know what's this point of the story, because I don't really like movements, like names and all of that. I don't get into it. I don't get into politics. I don't get into movements, whether they're feminist, yes, I'm anti-fascist, most of all against myself, because if I'm not careful, so yeah. I'm sorry, what's the point?
The point is, I think the education, but because Estonians need to choose, and the idea is to choose is the freedom of this country. I hope it don't be only a political decision. I hope it will be more than that. For that need to be cultured, not only one way. There is different ways,
Absolutely.
and after the child need to grow with that education. It's a fantastic country. And thank you very much for a small opportunity.
Thank you.
Hello?
Thank you. Are there any more questions or comments?
Yes.
Hey,
Should I put this on?
no, it's
Okay.
good. Thank you very much. It was really interesting listening to you.
Thank you.
What do you feel about victim mentality? Because I feel sometimes we're looking back at your future or looking back at your past and trying to make sense of the future based on the past. There's this, you can fall into victim mentality.
Absolutely.
Especially when you tie it very much with colonization, for
Absolutely.
example.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I that's a great question, and I had to really, again, on an individual level, these are the things that we have to kind of work with on our own, and I had to realize, again, this ayahuasca trip that I took, journey, was very instrumental in my breaking that pattern, because I started, my head was so far up colonialism's ass in terms of what I was reading, like I became what I hated. And the stories, you know, again, you know, if you're not, it's a slippery slope. All of a sudden, it's like, yeah, look what Europe does to the world, and da-da-da. I mean, I still say that, but it takes a certain level of, countries that I had to acknowledge that, okay, for example, Trinidad and Tobago, you know, it's like they were colonized, it's a colonized country, and then the people who are in power right now, it's, they're responsible. It's not because of, entirely because of colonialism, right? So, yeah, I mean, it's really important that we're vigilant with ourselves, we're vigorous with ourselves as well, that we take personal responsibility. Because if we don't take personal responsibility, and I was in that stage for a long time, then you forget about the agency that you have. And when you forget about the agency that you have, then it's a lost cause, right? So that's absolutely, we have to be vigilant about that we don't see ourselves as victims. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One more question.
Ma pean rääkima kahjuks eesti keeles, ma olen saksa inimene. Et huvitaks teie kui praegu Taanimaal elav inimene, kuidas on teie suhe Taani kirjandusega ja kas te üldse, kui palju te loete Taani autoreid?
That's a great question. I have read some of the old classic ones. There's one called Tove Ditlevsen.
Ditlevsen.
Yeah. I used to live in her neighborhood when I first came to Denmark. I also, of course, you can't forget Hans Christian Andersen, you know, came in there and some of it. And since I have moved to Denmark, there has been an explosion, actually, in literature coming from other backgrounds, which I have been very much, that's the community that I know and their work in literature. So that is what, that's my relationship to it. And it's actually, so as long as I'm alive, I'm going to always have goals. And one of my goals is actually to become better versed in Danish literature. And then the other goal is I want to write in Danish. Because my understanding of Danish it's a good foundation to build upon. So that is my goal, actually, is to understand it more literarily, because as a writer, and then also to be able to express myself in that way. So thank you.
You did mention also before Yahya Hassan, but how about? I mean, he published 2 books before he passed.
Yeah.
But how about the scene? I mean, is there anyone doing something similar right now in Denmark?
No. Well, yeah, but not on his level. He was his collection of poetry, the first one, is still the best-selling debut book of Danish poetry ever.
It sold a lot, and also everywhere else.
So he was incomparable. Like, he was really, I've seen him, I had the privilege of seeing him. He was definitely, there was something about him that was very special.
Yeah, I agree. Mm-hmm. So maybe one more question, if we would have time for that. If
anybody?
Okay.
Thank you for the very interesting talk. It was really a pleasure to listen to. And I maybe have a very simple question is, as you said, you worked as a teacher. How did you come to writing? What drew you into writing?
So when I was very young, because of the particular situation I was born into, I was, I detail it in my first book. So I was born into a very violent domestic situation. When I was 4, I just had this idea that I was going to tell the world about this because this wasn't right, and I knew that other people were in these situations, and whether individually or collectively, and I was seeing the relationship between the power structure that was going on within my home and seeing the similarities when I was outside at home. So I was noticing these patterns. And I was just very much dedicated to understanding them, and I believed and I still believe in the idea that it's very important, particularly for people who come from backgrounds that aren't usually in the arts, etc., for us to tell our story. So I've been very stubborn about that still. So that's just, and then when I moved to Denmark, and again, seeing these similarities and seeing that, I mean, Denmark has been good to me. I'm not, I really don't want to ever come off like I'm talking shit about Denmark, unless it's necessary, of course. But I owe Denmark a very big, debt. Denmark has been really amazing to me, and and that's also part of what my story, and that's the next chapter in my life, is to actually really, because the first book, James Baldwin, the American writer, is like, if you really love something, you critique it. That's my relationship. So my first book is that, when I do talk about Denmark and colonialism and the lack of what they teach, I have a problem with that, because if you're not teaching the truth about your history, then you're going to have patterns that are continuing. They're not going to break, right? So my next step in my literary life, if I'm allowed to have one in terms of being here on the planet, is to focus on the things the very positive stories and people, Danish, that have been a part of my life for the past over 20 years. Yeah. I've had a lot of opportunity there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is that
okay. Unless there's one more quick question, but I think that's also like a very nice thing to
absolutely, totally. It's all about.
So we'll be looking forward to your new writings.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming. It's been a pleasure to be here in this country and to see it, and be received also very graciously by the people that I encounter. I don't take that for granted. Thank you.
Thank you.